So I have been working on a project which required me to create this library model, and I was trying to create shelves with book, and I found it very interesting, and I just wanted to show you guys how to do it. As you can see, the density of books, and you have random seed, and you can do a lot of customization, as you can see. So yeah, we are going to learn how to create these shelves in Blender. Alright, so we have opened up the default Blender file. Be sure to save it before doing anything else because that is very necessary. I first like to change its pivot by going to the edit mode and moving the cube by 1 meter. So the pivot point is at the bottom and cube is at the top. Now we are going to make it look like a library. Make it a little taller and like that. Now when you are doing it for a specific project, I would recommend you to use size references so you are getting all the size right. There we go. As you can see, this is the size reference I used for my original build. This is just a normal cube that is resized to average human size, you can say. And obviously this library is too big, so we are going to make it a little smaller and a little bit thinner, like so. Okay, make it like that. Now we are going to cut half of it and add a mirror modifier on the Y side. Okay, so we just have to work on one side and other side will be done by itself. We're going to select the face and press I. Let's have it like that. Then we can extrude it back. Then we are going to select this small face and duplicate it. Press P to separate and select it. Now we are going to move it up and give it a solidify modifier. Okay, let's go for something about that side should do. We can also merge this face because that would be good. Clipping on and there we go. And then we can add the array modifier. Set the z value to something. Let's see what we can do. I'll move it a little bit up. Okay, and we can add more of those. Okay, that looks good enough. Now one thing I would do is slide them a little bit back, just tiny bit. Okay, there we go. I actually forgot to apply scale for both of these, so I'm gonna do that now. As you can see, it got a little bit messy, so we're going to fix that. Let's move it a little bit down and increase that. Okay, that should do. Alright, so once we are done with creating the bookshelf model, we are going to create some book assets. We're just going to add a cube again, move it up, make it 0.1 and make it a little thinner. Let's actually have it like that. Pretty small. And that looks a little bit like a book. I think I will make it a little bit bigger. I'm using this human reference to get a decent size for our book because I don't want it to make too big or too small. Okay, let's make it a little thicker. Okay, that should do. Be sure to apply the scale because it can sometimes cause a lot of issues. I'm going to add a loop cut here and I'm going to move it slightly like that and then do a bevel. Select all these faces and extrude them backwards. Okay, I will actually just scale those instead of extrude. And yeah, that should do. Alright, it looks pretty much like a book. I'm going to make it a little thicker. Apply the scale again and rename it to book aside 01. Now we are going to create some copies and create few variants. You don't have to do that, we can always create variants in geometry nodes, but I like to create like 3 variants at least because that just makes it look much better. I feel like you don't have to do much, you just have to randomly resize these books. I'm going to make this one really thick. Yeah, that should do. Apply the scales and rename those like that. Alright, we are going to hide these books and go to our shelves. Be sure to save it regularly because you don't want to lose all your progress, right? Now comes the fun part. We are going to add all those books in this shelf and it is going to be really fun. I really enjoyed trying to find a solution to this. So we are going to duplicate one of the edges. You can use any. I recommend using the outer ones because those are better. And then we are going to separate it. Now we are going to move them a little bit inside like that. Alright, now let's go to the geometry tab. We are going to remove the array modifier and solidify modifier because we really don't need them, and we are going to select the book distribute line we created. And why can't we see it though? There it is. And we are going to right click and convert to curve. Why curves? Because curves are just better. And we are going to scale it in the x-axis just a tiny bit so books aren't intercepting with the shelf. Alright, now let's add a new geometry node. Let's call it book, please. So this setup is really simple and really bare bones. You could add a lot of changes to it to make it work for you. However, I like to keep things simple because why would I want to make it complicated when I don't really need it? So let's start by adding curve to points. Then we need instance on points, and we can drag our collection here just like that. Be sure to click on separate children and reset children because we are going to need that, and also the pick instances. Alright, then we will just add random transforms, and we'll need one last node which is set material because we will need to give them a material. Alright, so it looks a little bit weird. Why is that? Because we will need to rotate them by 90 degrees like that. Alright, we can increase the count. That looks good, but they are really uniform. We don't want that. So we are going to just add a little bit scale and a little bit rotation. That adds a lot of variety, as you can see. And we can always just add an array modifier. Now instead of adding the array after our geometry node, you should always have the geometry node at the last to make sure that all of the books are randomized perfectly. Okay, before we do anything else, I would like to add some attributes to our geometry node. Okay, one also very important thing I forgot to mention is that you can set it to length, which I find much better than count. So yeah, let's add that. Okay, that should do. Now we are going to add the array modifier back. Okay, it looks pretty good so far. We can add a lot of transforms. We can also do a little bit like this. Okay, and now it is time for the textures. Textures are also really simple. I have provided a link in the description. You can download the textures from there. Those are completely free to use. So we are going to add a new material. We are going to call it bookshelf. Click on the principled BSDF. Click Ctrl Shift T, and we can locate to our material. And then select all the material files, and there we go. It is added. Now you can always use any material you like. There are a ton of free materials you can use both in Polyheaven and Ambient CG. We are going to use Ambient CG for now. Now as you can see, it looks kind of good, but it is very weird. Like you can see there is this weird thing going on because we still have not done the UV things. Doing UV unwrapping for the bookshelf is kind of just messing around until you find something that works, at least for me. So I just like to press A, then go to edge mode, right click, mark as shim, and then we can just press U and angle based unwrap. What that will do is like give a separate island to each face, and you can just manually go and make it however you like. So let's do that. I'm going to make it long, maybe something like this. There we go, that looks good. We'll make it a little bit like that, and we'll do the same for this face. Rotate, little bit scale. Let's select both of this face. Alright, there we go. It looks pretty decent. We could always add some color correction to it. I would like to make it a little darker and a little bit more saturated. Okay, let's add a little bit of something like that should do. Okay, now it's time for the book material. I'll just add that to this and call it books, right? And in the geometry nodes, we actually forgot to add the material here to the books. Alright, so let's create the random book material. We are going to add the object info node and use its random to create a color ramp like that and just plug it in. Okay, now we can add many colors as you want. Okay, so I'm just going to add all three colors so you guys can see how it will look. For now I'm using the reference I already had. Now it looks good, but it looks very flat. So first thing we are going to do is put the roughness to 1 because books are very rough, and then we are going to add a noise texture and then a little color ramp. It will just add a tiny bit of variation in our normal color. We can just use the multiply, and there we go. As you can see, it just adds a tiny bit of variation. If you are doing a close-up shot of these books, then I would highly recommend you to add more textures and make it look a little bit nicer. But for me, I was just going to use it as a background, so that is how far I went for the texture side. As you can see, it looks pretty good. You can always mess around with all these variables and you can do whatever you like with those. Now, if you don't want to go to the trouble of making it yourself, I have provided a file in the description. You can just download it and use it however you like for free. Alright? So that was all for this tutorial, and I will see you next week.